Welcome to the 5th episode of my exotic tier list. In this episode, we're going to review one of the only primary grenade launchers in the game and slapping it onto our exotic tier list. It is, of course, Fighting Lion. Not only was Fighting Lion the only primary grenade launcher in the game at launch, it stayed that way until very recently with Episode Revenant, which introduced Alethonym as the second primary grenade launcher, and it is also exotic. Fighting Lion's intrinsic trait, Delayed Gratification, says grenade projectiles will bounce off surfaces, press your firing button to shoot a projectile, release the button to detonate the projectile. In testing, I couldn't find any difference between the bounciness of the Fighting Lion grenade versus any other lightweight grenade launcher grenade, therefore I guess it's just a fancy way of saying it's a lightweight grenade launcher. Fighting Lion's exotic trait, Thin Herd, says direct hits do increase damage to combatant shields and cause a volatile detonation. Dealing damage increases reload speed. Rapid final blows against grenade damage combatants refill the magazine. There's a whole lot going on there. That trait is doing a lot of heavy lifting in this exotic. First off, direct hits doing increased damage to combatants and causing a volatile detonation does an immense amount of work. That is very noticeable when using this weapon. Dealing damage increases reload speed is also very nice, especially with a grenade launcher where you have to reload after every single shot. And rapid final blows against grenade damaged combatants refill the magazine is actually incredibly hard to get it to trigger. When it does, if anything else, it just throws me off, and I don't actually think it's beneficial. Fighting Lion's Catalyst has two main effects. The first is that it increases the reload speed, which is very nice given that it is a grenade launcher. Secondly, it says after this weapon fires, equipped kinetic and power weapons gain a brief period of increased handling and accuracy. This feels kind of weird because Fighting Lion very much encourages holding down the trigger with the projectile until you think it's the optimal time to let it explode, and that's the playstyle it encourages, so to have its catalyst seem to encourage swapping weapons upon firing the weapon in order to double down on damage, I guess, in a way. Feels really weird. I mean, the effect may last longer than it would to let the projectile explode. You might still get a second or two of it, but it feels weirdly like it conflicts, and I feel like it doesn't really have a place here. Fighting Lion is a rather fun weapon to use. It does encourage a playstyle which you don't really see with other weapons in the game, given that it is the only primary grenade launcher that is a traditional grenade launcher. With other grenade launchers, you have to worry about how much ammo you have, and of course, since they made the changes to have primary ammo infinite, it really does let Fighting Lion come into its own in a way. It's great for thinning the herd of a large group of enemies. The volatile explosions do a lot of work as well. It doesn't do amazing boss damage, but it's pretty good against major or minor enemies, especially if you can get direct hits. So overall, it is a pretty fun time using Fighting Lion, but it may not be the most practical weapon in a lot of cases. It was rather difficult to find weapons to compare Fighting Lion to, given that it is one of two primary grenade launchers in the game, and the other one, being Alethonym, is so different in playstyle. I have added it for the comparison's sake because of the connection there, but they are widely different weapons. The two legendary grenade launchers that I've chosen are of course special grenade launchers, as no primary ones exist in the legendary category, and these are Truthteller and Orewing's Maul. First up is direct impact damage. This is admittedly the least important damage stat, with the area of effect explosion being the more important one. However, it's currently very difficult to test that in a controlled environment. Hopefully the new firing range coming in the Edge of Fate will help with this. First is Truthteller with 6,680 damage, followed by Orewing's Maul with 4,072, Fighting Lion with 2,538, and lastly Alethonym with 2,189. The key thing to remember here is that Truthteller and Orewing's Maul are special weapons, whereas Alethonym and Fighting Lion are primary weapons. Therefore, they would be expected to do far less damage because they have infinite ammo compared to the special weapons, which have to rely on the special ammo, obviously. For reload speed, I've differed slightly from how reload speed is usually calculated. Usually it's just you click the reload button, the weapon reloads, and whenever you can fire another shot, that's the reload speed. But with a grenade launcher, there is only one shot in the magazine. Therefore, I took the time from shooting, waiting for it to reload, and then shooting again. You can reload slightly quicker by spamming the reload button after shooting, but I'd really rather not do that. So we're going to use my method here. So Alethonym, Truthteller and Orewing's Maul all have essentially the same reload speed of 2 seconds, 42 frames, 43 frames and 44 frames respectively. Fighting Lion takes by far the longest amount of time to reload, even with the catalyst, at 3 seconds and 23 frames. Light.gg tells me that it would take an extra 0.64 of a second to reload without the catalyst, which equates to roughly 40 frames in my case, which means it would take approximately 4 seconds to reload this weapon without a catalyst. Aim down sight speed isn't very important for a grenade launcher, as you can be just as effective by hip firing. However, in this department, Fighting Lion was the quickest at 16 frames, followed by Orewing's Maul at 17 frames, and then Truthteller and Alethonym were both 19 frames. The last thing here is the bounce of the projectile, which seemed to be essentially identical across each of these grenade launchers, apart from slight variations in left to right movement, which is just natural when it comes to bouncing physics. And of course, Alethonym doesn't actually have a projectile that bounces, therefore it's barely a grenade launcher, but sure. Alright. Now that that's out of the way, let's not kid ourselves anymore. Fighting Lion does not really compare to any of these grenade launchers in any way, shape or form. But the reason for that testing is because it does pose a question. Are you willing to trade some damage off of each grenade in order to shoot infinite grenades? And if the answer to that question isn't yes, I'm quite frankly disappointed, and you should probably go and sit in the dark corner for a wee while and try to figure out where things went wrong. Does Fighting Lion do an excessive amount of damage? Nah. Does it outclass all the other grenade launchers in the game? Not even remotely close. Is it an absolute blast to use? Absolutely. Despite the fact that Fighting Lion was one of the original exotics in Destiny 2, it still is essentially the only primary grenade launcher in the game, aside from Alethonym, that's barely a grenade launcher. Therefore it is still really, really unique. It's the only weapon in the game which allows you to fire infinite grenades, and to be fair, that wins me over immediately. And it's really good at wiping out hordes of enemies, which special grenade launchers are in a weird territory because they're not enough to kill bosses, really, or to be viable in that case. But they're also not really meant for small, waves of enemies. So Fighting Lion's a pretty good sweet spot. The void explosions that they added to Fighting Lion at some stage are also really fun, and is just a pure bonus on top of the fact it can shoot infinite grenades, quite frankly. And it really adds to the fun factor for this weapon. Would I recommend taking this weapon into a dungeon or harder content? Not really. I did try to play through one of the dungeons during Rites of the Nine with Fighting Lion, and it was a right pain, and I would not recommend it. But in all the other activities and strikes, patrols, anything just missions, campaigns, Fighting Lion's a great fun. I really enjoy it, and it's a unique challenge as well, because trying to kill enemies with grenades, and it's a bounty grenade and all this sort of stuff, can be a nice change of pace from using just bullets all the time. So I do really recommend it. In this series, we do rate the exotics in terms of the fun factor that each weapon has, as opposed to how good the weapon is or how viable it is in different content. However, usually a good weapon does also correlate stronger to a funner weapon. But in Fighting Lion's case, it may not be the strongest weapon, but it certainly is one of the funnest. Therefore, it gets an A from me. Please do let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Perhaps you also believe that Fighting Lion should be in the A tier, or maybe you believe it should be in the trash. Regardless, thanks for watching this episode of the Exotic Tier List. Please consider leaving a like, maybe even subscribing if you would like to see more, and I'll see you in the next one, which will be Legend of Acrius. Bye bye.